Alright everyone, welcome back to another video of the Explain series. This is Himanshu from Salesforce Makes Sense, and in this video we are going to cover a very important, very crucial topic, that's sharing, right? Sharing is something that everyone is troubled with. What has gone wrong? What has happened with this record? Why am I not getting the access? How is the right kind of access defined? Where can I set it? What all places can I set it? Pretty much everything is what we are going to cover in this particular explained series. Be with me. This is going to be a bit more of a theoretical kind of a video, and we'll look into the org. We'll try to understand what can be configured where, what are the potential use cases, what are the problems, how you should look into sharing as a whole, and how can this help you as an admin or a developer to debug issues and fix your sharing settings across the org so that the right kind of data is shared with the right kind of people, right? That is the plan. So we'll start on that note. Let's get started. So talking about the definition of sharing, right? Sharing is caring. Yeah, that's true. But sometimes it might not be. Starting off with a joke, I'm so sorry. All right. So the access of objects in Salesforce is controlled by object permissions, right? So let's say you want to share contact records, right? So what do? You share the object. How do you share it? You do it by setting up object permissions. What are object permissions? Read, create, edit, delete, view all, modify all, right? Those are the permissions. Let's take a look at Salesforce. I'll constantly switch my screen from my keynote presentation to the Salesforce screen so that I can show you what I'm talking about, right? So if I go to profiles, how do we set our very first level permissions? Object permissions, right? If I had to give access to an object, right, where would I do it? I would do it by the profile level, right, or the permission set level. So if I take a look at, let's say, one random profile, you have the object settings, right? So this is where you can give the CRUD operations or the create, read, create, edit, delete permissions on the object level, correct? Per object. Next, the fields and the attributes of an object can be made accessible through field level permissions or field level security. So what we've done, the first thing is object permissions are given. Now inside an object, there are thousands of fields, right? How to give access on the field? You do that by giving read or edit access on the profile level for each field. That is your field level permission. Okay. So we have done that. What about the data that's created for any object? How do you control the access for data? So what we have looked at right now is the object level permission and the field level permission. What are objects and fields? They are metadata, right? So the object will be used to store your actual data, right? Be with me with throughout this video, and a lot of words will start to make sense. A lot of things will be clear, but you have to be very focused, okay? This is the accounts tab. I am looking at an account record. An account record has a lot of fields, right? What defines a metadata and what is data? So this particular record here, right here, is data. This is one data record. This is the data of a company called Trailhead. Okay, but this particular data is formed by what? By some fields and attributes. So the rating is warm, the name is Trailhead, the SIC code is 1453. So these individual attributes make up the entire data, right? What are these individual attributes? They are metadata, data about data. That's metadata, right? So if I have to talk, what is Trailhead? Or if I had to ask about what is your name? So you would say, my name is Himanshu, right? Where do you work? You would say, I work here in XYZ, right? What do you do? What are your hobbies? So these identifiers that give me information about myself, right? You can look at it as data and metadata. All right. So metadata comes first. The object name, the type of object, object level permissions. Then comes the fields and attributes, individual identifiers. These two things comprise of the metadata. What does metadata do? It helps you derive data, right? And that's where you have the trailhead account record. So trailhead account record has these identifiers or these attributes. All right. What do we do or what do we achieve on the profile level? We achieve the metadata level permissions only on the profile level. Okay. Whether I'll be able to see the account tab or not. whether I'll be able to access the contact records or not, right? Sorry, not the contact records, whether I'll be able to create a contact record or not, whether I can see all the contact records or not, right? Whether if out of the 48 fields on the lead object, do I have access to the three fields, the three custom fields I've created? All of this can be configured on the profile level or the permission set level, which is what you see here. This is the metadata permissions. What layout will be assigned, which record type will be assigned, what is the default record type, what level of object permissions do I have? Can I create a record? Yes. Can I edit the record? Yes. Can I delete the record? Yes. Can I modify pretty much any and everyone's record? No, you don't have that permission. Okay. On the field level, channel program level name. Can I see this, see what value does this field or attribute hold? Yes. Can I modify it? No. Billing address, can I see it? Yes. Can I modify it? Yes, you can. So profile level permissions dictate or govern the object permissions and the field level permissions that you define for each and every object. Okay, but now once you have the metadata setup defined, how do you control the records that are getting created? How do you share that with people? How do you share that with personas? How do you share that with actors? How do you define which kind of data will be shared of what kind of users? Is where sharing comes into the picture. Okay, so what about data that's created for any object? How do you control the access of data? That's where sharing settings come into the picture, and you can control the record level access through sharing settings. And that is our syllabus for the video today on the explain series. All right, so the basic context is ready. Awesome. Let's look at the structure or the hierarchy of how sharing works and what comes before what comes next, and how you should look at sharing as a whole whenever you are looking at sharing a new object, sharing an existing object, removing some sharing or adding some sharing. All of that, how do you look at it as the entire picture? So the underlying object and field permissions come right below. They set the pace. So that's the metadata level. And as you go up, you are basically opening up the access. We'll talk about what is the opening up of access mean. Okay, the first thing that comes into the picture is the org wide defaults, that is OWD. You must have heard a lot of admins and developers saying OWD. Can you check the OWD for this custom object? Can you check if it is read only private? What is the OWD for this particular object? What is the sharing setting for this particular object in the community side? You must have heard a lot of people using this word, right? OWD. That is the sharing setting, or rather the org wide default. That's the first level. So you define the record level access on the OWD level, meaning the org level, meaning your company level, meaning your business level. Okay. So you say these 10 objects will be available for everyone. These three objects will be available for everyone and they can modify it. These seven objects will not be available to anyone. Only people who are special or VIP, only those people will be able to access. These 11 objects will be available to everyone, to my managers also. So those kind of settings on a global level, more like a business level, more like an org level, more like an organization level, company level, is defined on the OWD. That's this particular bar right here, which is called OWD, which is full short for org wide defaults. We also call them sharing settings. Where do you find it? If I go to the quick find box on Lightning, under security, you have sharing settings. All right. So sharing settings, if I do this the same in classic, so under security controls, this is where you see your org wide defaults, the OWD, and this is available for all objects. Okay, so you see what you can do here is you can choose which object to look at. Let's say I want to look at cases. Okay, so I can see what is the access given for cases. I can see the org wide default for the case object. Okay, we'll deep dive into a bit later. Okay, what all of this means. Next is the role hierarchy. Now, any and every business you are in or you look at has a role hierarchy, right? We even have a role hierarchy in our family, right? You have your grandparents, you have your parents, then you have your siblings, and you yourself are there, and then you have your younger siblings. So that's a hierarchy. Similarly, every business has an hierarchy. You might have this founder and the CEO, then you might have the COO, CTO, right? And then you might have the VP, the DSVP, the SVPs, and then you might have the regional staff, then you might have local employees, you might have contractors under the employees, you might have shadow resources, you might have mentors above the employees. So there is a role hierarchy structure in pretty much any and every business. You take a look at any sales business, let's say, right? You will have regional level presidents, you would have regional level vice presidents, then you would have regional level inspectors, then you would have regional level contractors, and all of that stuff, right? If you take a look at a service side implementation or a service cloud business, you would see, you would have regional staff, followed by regional level ground representative, followed by regional level ground support staff. So all of that stuff is available in a role hierarchy, right? Someone is on the top of the ladder, someone is somewhere in the middle, somewhere is below, who's trying to go on top. So it's similar to how the food chain works, it's similar to how your family hierarchy works, it's pretty much same in the business line also. Okay, sharing can be done based on the role hierarchy level also. Okay, and this is called vertical sharing. Why? Because you are doing a vertical sharing from bottom to up, or bottom up or top down, right? You figure out how. So for example, you are managing three employees. Those three employees, whatever they do, right, you would have access to that, correct? Which means any and everything that is shared to the three employees will implicitly share to you. Correct? So that's how role hierarchy comes into the picture. Let's say you have your own manager. So that manager will be able to see the visibility of yours as well as your employees, the three employees that are under you. So that's how the vertical sharing works. Even this is available on the org-wide sharing setting level, and you have a role hierarchy where you can maintain it. So you see on the sharing settings, on every object, let's switch back to all objects. You have something called grant access using hierarchies. This checkbox defines whether for an object can the hierarchy, people high above on the hierarchy than us, can access what we own or not. So that's the role hierarchy. And where can you configure roles into the system? You can go to role hierarchy here, manage user roles. So if I can set up roles, I can have a lot of roles configured here. Okay, so you can see this in a sorted list view, or if you want to see it in a tree view, which will be helpful. If I expand, right? So you'll see all of these roles are available here. Okay, and you can add new roles, you can assign people some roles, you can do a lot of stuff here. All right, so that is role hierarchy. The next thing is sharing rules, right? You have your org-wide settings. On top of it, you have given role hierarchy access. Superior people can access whatever, subordinates own and all of that stuff. Then, if you want to share something across laterally, right, someone who's not in the hierarchy but someone who's working side by side, someone who's working on a separate region altogether but needs access to the same kind of data that you own, how do you define that? You create sharing rules. Okay, these sharing rules can also be created for per object. So if I go back to sharing settings, you can create a sharing rule for each and every object. Okay, so if I go to lead, right, you'll see down below, if I scroll down, this is the list of all the objects. Then down below, you have sharing rules for each and every object. So whatever is not shared already can be shared. The access can be opened up to more people. Let's say today five people are working on an opportunity. They're working on a $1 million deal, right? And three more people have to be given access because it's a very important deal for the company. So they add three more people to the deal. How do they give them access to all the documents, all the records that are associated to this opportunity? By writing a sharing rule, right? So you can write a sharing rule and you can give access to maybe one user, maybe a group of users, maybe to certain users, their coordinates, their subordinates, all of that can be done by sharing rules. Okay, so you can configure sharing rules to open up more access, and this access is opened up laterally. Hope you understand lateral, right? More like not horizontal entirely, but lateral. It can be to people who are not directly related, right? Similar to how you have it on the role hierarchy. What about unrelated users? How do you share access? How do you give access to them? By setting up sharing rules. And then finally, if you're not able to do even sharing rules, you want to further open up the access on a specific record level, right? How do you do that? You do that by going to the specific record and manually sharing that record. All right. So if you see, I am currently on the trailhead record. This record is currently owned by Himanshu, and whoever has the read access or the write access can see it or modify it. But tomorrow, if I want to share this with a specific person or a specific set of user, I can go to the record, the individual record level, and I can click on the sharing button here. And this will tell me currently this is being shared with Himanshu. Because why? Because he is the owner, right? But if I want to share it with some other people, let's say the integration user needs access, I can add and I can give that relevant access, right? Why do I see the case and the opportunity? Because case and opportunity are child of account. They are children of account and they are directly governed by how account ownership or how account sharing works. Okay, that's why you can set, okay, I want to give the integration user read only access on the case and read write on the opportunity, and account will also be read write. I'll just say save. So what this will do is this has manually, I have manually shared my data with another user in the system. That is your manual sharing. And if you notice what we did going from bottom to up is basically we opened up access. So you cannot restrict access, you cannot reduce access, you can only open up access. So whatever you define on your global level, okay, then you set up some role hierarchy. So you gave access and you assign some roles. So people below your role hierarchy, you are able to access their data. But then you also wanted to work in projects that are across your team, let's say some other team's projects, so you needed access to their data. So you created some sharing rules to share data across, more like lateral. And then even once that was done, you wanted access to a specific data, something that a user can do manually, so you went with manual sharing. Okay, so this is your bottom up and you have been able to open up access. You cannot reduce or reduce the access, you can only open it up. All right, so that's your high level context overview of sharing. All right, we'll look at each of these elements individually and that will give you a better clarity. I'll talk through all of the aspects of sharing and that will give you a bigger picture, a clearer picture. But right now, I hope the context, the high level brief is clear as to how sharing works and what sharing is and what all elements are in the picture. So the OWD, the role hierarchy, sharing rules, and then manual sharing. All right, great. Take a pause, take a 2 minute break, and then let's jump into the next section. We'll start with OWD, the very first framework in the sharing settings. That's org-wide defaults. All right, so let's start with org-wide defaults, which is OWD, right? So the very first level or the base level of sharing, or rather the default access level for any object, all right, is configured on the OWD level. That is the sharing settings on the org, right? This bit right here. Let's go to sharing settings, so this bit right here. Okay, so this is the base level. After the metadata permissions are given on the profile and permission sets, you can go to sharing settings and that's where you can start your record level access. What level of access should be given is determined on the OWD level. All right, so if I take a casual look at the objects, right, so let's take a look at, for example, let's say task. So if I look at task, there would be probably activity. So you see activity, it says that there are two columns or rather three: default internal access, default external access, grant access using hierarchies, and it says private. Okay, what about let's say lead? So lead, it says public read write transfer for internal and public read write transfer for external. So these are some values that are given and we see different values. We see private, public full access, controlled by, public read only, read write transfer, read write. So there are some certain values that are available. All right, so the thing is that there are two types of users, right? One is the internal users who log into Salesforce using a valid credential, a username and a password, right? They log into the Salesforce org, just like how we log in, right? I mean, how I log in. The other people are people who access the sites, which is the Experience Cloud side of the world, right? This is the Experience Cloud side, and they access Experience Cloud, correct? So they log in using a credential that lets them log into a portal, not the Salesforce org essentially, but the Experience Cloud portal, correct? So that's the second type of people. And then there are another type of people who are the guest users. Now, guest users are guests to a specific portal, not to the Salesforce org. Okay, they are guests to a specific portal. For example, if you're shopping on, let's say, adidas.com or nike.com, or you're looking, you're, browsing facebook.com, right? Or you're browsing Skyscanner. What do? You either log in as a member or you continue as a guest, correct? So you can consider, let's say this is your community, or let's say this World Cup tournament is your community, right? So people who have a valid credential to log into the system to access the World Cup tournament portal are the external users, and people who can access this site without a login are called the guest users. All right, that's Experience Cloud nomenclature. And people who log into the Salesforce org, this org right here, are called internal users. So what Salesforce does is sets up the underlying architecture for sharing in three different ways for these three different type of users. And that is why you see these two sections available, the internal and the external. Guest is handled separately. Okay, so if you see internal and external, that's the base level setup that you can do, which means if you are logging to the Salesforce org and you want to access the lead object access, the access given is read, write, transfer, meaning you can view a lead, you can edit a lead, and you can transfer the ownership of a lead. You can do all of these three things. All right. What can a community user or what can an Experience Cloud portal user do? He can do the same thing. They can also read, write, and transfer. All right. For example, what about the user object? User object. So user object, the internal access is read only, meaning you can only view records. You cannot edit them. What about external users? They can just, if they have created their own records, they can only see them. They cannot, make any changes or look at other people's records. All right. So there are different variations available, different type of settings. And the three tiers of sharing are private, public read only, and public read write. Okay. Private, public read only, and public read write. If in case you see a sharing setting that is confined to control by parent, that implies that the object is a child to a parent object, which governs its security and sharing. Now you must know that for certain standard objects like account, they have a lot of account has a lot of children, right? It has contact, opportunity, cases. So there's a different kind of sharing setting that's available out of the box from the platform. However, if you create a master detailed relationship between two different objects, right? What happens in such cases? The sharing is defined, the sharing of the child object is defined by the parent. So if the parent is public read only, the child will automatically be public read only, which is why for the child objects, you will notice that it says control by parent or some control by keyword is written. You will notice see control by parent. What would be the parent of quote? It would be opportunity. All right, you will see campaign member. So campaign member is part of which object? Of a campaign. So it is controlled by campaign. That is the campaign object. That's the control by parent and control by object that you see. Apart from that, we talked about the three tiers, right? Private, read only, and public read write. So you see private is available, public read only is available, and public read write is available. These are the three primary sharing tiers that are available for us to configure. How do you configure? If I just go ahead and say edit, you will notice that I get a drop down to change. So you see, opportunity is currently set at public read write. So what I can do is I can say public read only, or I can move it to private. So we'll understand what these three tiers mean, but this is available to me. What about things like, let's say, price book? You see, you have use, view only, no access. So the idea is there are certain standard objects that have a specific kind of sharing that is defined by Salesforce, and that does not come into the same nomenclature as these three options, which is private, public read only, public read write. Now, any custom object that you create and you want to set up the sharing, you will only get these three options: private, public read only, public read write. You might ask, Himanshu, will I get the use option? Will I get the view only option? Will I get a read write transfer option? No, you will not. This is all for certain standard objects and only for certain specific objects defined by Salesforce to handle the sharing mechanism. Okay, so for custom objects, you will only get these three options: private, public read only, and public read write. And this is true for most of the other objects also. If you notice, that's the case with most of the objects, except for some. For example, you'll notice that lead has an extra tier available, right? Then you will see that price book has a different tier available. You will see calendar has a different sharing mechanism. So certain standard objects have different mechanism. All right, let's go back. Now, internal users, right? Whenever sharing settings are modified, the sharing settings are recalculated. What does this mean? This means today, if I just say cancel here and I'm logged in as a user, right? And it says that account and contact, or sorry, account and contract, right? It says public read write, which means I as a user should be able to see all the accounts and I should be able to edit them as well. Okay. However, if I just go ahead and say edit and I would want to change the sharing setting for accounts, right? Accounts and contracts to, let's say, public read only or public or private, the sharing will be recalculated, right? Which means all the records that exist in the system, their sharing will be recalculated so that I am given access, or I am given visibility to only the certain set of records with the right kind of access that is defined here. Okay, based on this, org-wide sharing rule will run and it will recalculate what access do I have to the records. Once I set this to private, if I log in, I'll be only be able to see accounts and contracts that are created by me. If there's something that you have created, I'll not be able to see it. Okay, if it is set to private. So a recalculation happens whenever the sharing settings are modified. Okay, and once this is completed, you will get a notification email on your email address that the recalculation is completed. You should now have access to the new set of records. Okay, now there are external users. The idea of external users, to keep it separate, is, see, people who are accessing the portal are not accessing the Salesforce org, meaning they should already have some restrictive access, right? Which is why we have opened the portal for them. We have opened the Experience Cloud site for them. We don't want them to access the standard capabilities or standard Salesforce objects or a lot of things that are available that might be sensitive, that might be data compliant, that might have some data that we don't want people to access. So that's why we create Experience Cloud portals and we create users there. Correct? So Salesforce provides the flexibility to set up and configure access for external users separately. All right. So which is why you see the second column here. So what you can do is you can define external access for the same object differently for the internal users and differently for the external users. All right. So this could be public read only and this could be private. You could do that. So you see, when I change this to private, this stays private and this stays read only. Okay. Now, with Experience Cloud users, it's always a good practice to set the object setting to private for external users and public read only and read write for internal users, right? So ideally, it is always said and it is always marked as a best practice that keep things private on the external side. You'll see, which is why most of the settings are set to private. You see, for the external users, it is set to private. Some are public read write. What you should ideally do is you should keep the setting as private and then you should open up access based on requirement. We'll understand how that can be done. But if you have seen the very introduction part of it, you know that you can create sharing rules, right? So you should always ensure that the end user should only have access to the data that he or she needs. They should never have more access, because the more with more power comes more responsibility, right? That's the thing. If you get access to a lot more data than you are supposed to, you might end up messing it, you might end up using it, you might end up viewing it, you might end up sharing it, right? So external users are users who are not part of the core Salesforce ecosystem. They log into the site. So why to give access to things that they don't need access to? That's the primary idea, right? So you should always move this to private and then you should open up access by creating sharing rules. All right, that's the best practice. And for internal users, you can keep it to read only or read write, because these are internal users. You don't have to worry because they are license based paid users who are accessing the Salesforce environment directly. All right, an interesting thing to note here is that the default external user access can either be equal or more restrictive than the internal user access. All right, what does this mean? This means that external users will always have either the same or less kind of access compared to the internal users. And that makes sense, right? If an internal user is set to public read only, the external user can only be set to private or public read only. The external user can never be public read write. Okay, let me just say cancel and let me show that to you and it will throw you an error. Okay, so let's first of all see the sharing recalculation. So I'm just saying edit and I'll just go ahead and say that all the account and contacts should be public read only for both internal and external. I'll say save. It says that they will be recalculated, which may require some time. So you will be notified by an email notification. Do you want to continue? I say okay, and this enables and starts the recalculation. See, one or more sharing operation has been initiated. See below for additional details. Now, if I go ahead and just try to, you see, this is currently set to public read write. This should change to public read only. Okay, let's say refresh. So it's now public read only. So the sharing has been recalculated, and now I'll not have access to edit any records. I'll have access to only see all the records, not edit them. Okay, now let me show you something. Let's say edit, and what I want to do is the internal access stays read only, but I'm saying that the external access should be public read write, which is more than the internal access. Correct? So if I say save and I say okay, it says that the default access must be more restrictive or equal to the default internal access. So I cannot have anything beyond the public read only. I can have it either equal or I can have it less. So I'll say this will be private and I'll say save. So that will allow me to say okay, and it will do another recalculation of the sharing settings. Okay, and this is for the external users. All right, cool. So that was that note. Always ensure that you have a good practice to follow. You keep the object setting to private for all the external users, irrespective of which object it is, and you open up access based on the requirement. Okay, and then the default external user access can either be the same or it can be less restrictive. Sorry, it can be more restrictive than the internal user access. So if you are a public read only internal user for an object, you will be either private or public read only for on the external side, not public read write on the external side. Okay, what about guest users? So for guest users, there's no change that's available. The default access to all the objects is set as private. Okay, and this cannot be changed. You don't get any access available here to change. Okay, so on the org sharing setting, there's nothing. So there's something on the community side where you get a guest user profile and you can configure. Okay, so the default access will always be private and it cannot be changed. However, if you if you go to the site and you try to go to the force.com go to force.com and you try to edit the profile, that's where you can add access, that's where you can open up access for the guest users. But here by default it will always be private and it is not available to change also. Okay, awesome. Now let's talk about the different access levels. So you have been hearing a lot about private, public read write, public read only. Imanshu, what is this? Right? You've not explained this properly. So this is the time to explain the different access levels that are available. Okay. So these are the six primary key available access levels, out of which I've talked about private, public read only, public read write, controlled by parent. Right? And you'll notice that there are some special ones as well. So public full access is only available for campaigns. Okay. Public read write transfer is only available for leads and cases. If you try to make sense of it, let's start from the beginning. Control by parent. What does this mean? This means that the access will be governed by the parent. Whatever is the access level of the parent, the same will be cascaded to the children. So, example, if account is private, opportunity and case will also be private. So you see, if I say private, it says that the opportunity access must be private when the account access is set to private. Take a look at the opportunity here. This will also change. So you see, this is now private. Okay, so this is kind of controlled by parent, but it is on a standard object nomenclature, right? If I look at something more of a custom, let's say, let's take a look at some custom objects down below. I don't see any control by parent. I might not have any master detail, but if you have a master detail relationship, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to see that you can only change the sharing settings of your parent, and that will govern the sharing settings of your child if it is a master detail. Okay, which means that the child is controlled by the parent. So channel program level is controlled by channel program member is controlled by channel program, because it says controlled by parent and this is the parent. So if channel program is private, the members will also have the private sharing. for internal users and private for external users. Make sense? That's the first one. What's the second one? It says private. So private is nothing but, let me just quickly take a look at, okay. Yeah. So private is nothing but the records that you create are the only records you will have access to. Hear me again. The records that you create in the system, you will have access to only those records. You will not be able to see any other record. You'll not be able to touch or modify any other record in the system. That is the meaning of private. Okay. So whatever records you create, let's say this account is private, right? So tomorrow if you log into the system, you create an account. Will you be able to see accounts that Himanshu created? No, you will not be able to see it. You'll only be able to see accounts that you created and you can only play around with them. That's the meaning of private sharing. Okay, what is public read only? Try to guess. Public read only means whatever is available in the public is read only to me. Meaning, if you log in tomorrow, you will be able to see your records just like private, but alongside that, you will get some more add-ons, some more benefits. You'll be able to see records created by everyone else. So Himanshu created some records, let's say 8 records. Will you be able to see them? Yes, you'll be able to see them. But will you be able to touch and modify them? No, you cannot. They are public read only, meaning the things created by the public will be read only. Whatever you have created, you can modify. That's opening up the access to public read only. What's the next? The next one is public read write. This is the maximum access that you can have. Meaning, yes, just like the name suggests, if you log in to your system, you can very well take a look at your records, you can modify them, but alongside that, you can also look at everyone else's records and you can modify those as well. That's public read write. Okay. Now, public read write transfer. As of now, we know this bit, public read write. But why transfer? Because leads and cases have, these are standard objects, right? Leads and cases, and they have a transfer mechanism, right? Leads can be transferred, right? Cases can be transferred. One is from the sales cloud implementation, which is leads, and then you have the cases, which are from the service cloud implementation. So there's the transfer option available, and this is only for these two objects, leads and cases. So you see leads have these 3 levels followed by the transfer option also. Okay. And then what about case? You'll see the same is with case. Okay, the next one is public full access. So public full access is only available for campaigns. You see, there are 3 levels, and then public full access is one more level that's available only for campaigns. All right, so these are the primary access levels that are available. You are able to see some more, right? For example, price book has its own, calendar has its own, but no other object will get these kind of access levels. The primary access levels that you should be concerned with is the first 4: controlled by parent, private, public read only, and public read write. All right, great. So that was all about OWD, or rather the sharing settings. Next, we'll take a look at roles, which is giving access through hierarchy. All right, so now let's talk about roles, right? Providing access through hierarchy. So if we want to grant access to people who are above our role in the hierarchy ladder, right? In such cases, we can use the checkbox that says grant access using hierarchies, right? And what this will do is this will enable the access for any user who's above our current role. All right, let's take a look at Salesforce sharing settings page. We talked about the internal and the external access. That's on the sharing settings on the org-wide defaults, correct? Alongside this, you have also something that's called grant access using hierarchies. This checkbox governs whether or not access will be given to people on top of us on the hierarchy ladder. All right, what you will notice is this checkbox, if I click on the edit button, this checkbox is disabled for all the standard objects, meaning it is selected by default for all the standard objects. However, for any custom objects, we can enable or disable it. If you disable it, you are trying to say the system that if I have a manager in the role hierarchy, do not grant access to my records to my manager. okay, through the role hierarchy access sharing. Do not. But if you are saying that, okay, grant access using hierarchies, your manager will be able to see your records. Your manager's manager will be able to see the manager's records as well as your records. So that will be governed through role hierarchy if this checkbox is checked. All right, so this is the singular checkbox that's available for all the objects. Now, only for custom objects, it is something that you can check or uncheck. However, for standard objects, it is not something that you can play with. All right, so for standard objects, it will always be implicit that access using hierarchies will be given. Okay, now what is that access using hierarchy? If you go to the roles page, right? If you go to set up roles, you'll see that this is like, let's say this is your role hierarchy, and I'll just say expand all. If you are someone from the customer support North America region, the SVP customer service and support, who is the immediate parent of this particular role or people in this role, will have access to all the records that this role owns. Correct? Now, for those of you who don't know where the role is configured, right? So if I go to users, so each user is assigned a role. So if you take a look at this name right here, I am the system administrator and I have a role of the chairman. So this is where you can assign roles and each user is given a role. It's not mandatory, but you can set up a role. So you see, if I say I am customer support North America or I am customer support international, I will be under the SVP customer services and support. So anyone from SVP customer services and support will be able to see my records because I am one level down in the role hierarchy and because the grant access using hierarchies checkbox is checked. What happens if you don't check it? What happens if you don't check the checkbox for any custom object record? In that case, the person who's on top of the ladder or maybe one step higher than you on the SVP level will not have access to the records that you own. All right, so let's say, for example, if you take a look at SVP Sales and Marketing, if I expand this, it has VP International, VP Marketing, VP North American team, right? Then VP North American team has Director Channel Sales and then the Channel Sales team. Let's say you are assigned the Channel Sales team role. What does that mean? This means that the Director Channel Sales, the VP North American Sales, the SVP Sales Marketing, the CEO, everyone will have access to your record. That's the role hierarchy concept, and that's how the sharing will work. Okay, it will be implicitly shared because you have enabled the grant access using hierarchies checkbox. All right, now one important consideration to understand is if a user, let's say through the profile level, right, where we give the CRUD permissions, if the user has the view all data or modify all data permissions, what does that mean? That means you are able to see all data or see and modify all data. In that case, the access is automatically available even if this checkbox is disabled. And that makes sense, right? Even if grant access using hierarchies is not there, if you have the view all or the modify all permission on your profile level, what does that mean? Irrespective of any user's record, you will be able to see all the data. And if you have the modify all, you'll be able to see all data and edit all data or modify all data. So that checkbox does not make sense. It basically becomes irrelevant. So if you have one of these two permissions, even if this checkbox is unchecked, the access is automatically available for all the records. All right, and that is true also, right? It makes logical sense. All right, a good to know thing, if a child object is removed from a master detail relationship. All right, so we are talking about a master detail relationship wherein you have a parent and a child, and the child object is removed. Let's say we delete the master detail relationship. So in that case, the OWD or the sharing setting of the object is set to public read write, and access using hierarchy checkbox is automatically set to true. Correct? Now, why is this important and why is it good to know? Normally, when you are in a master detail or your record is in a master detail relationship and you are a child object, right? What will be your sharing setting? It will be controlled by parent, correct? So if it is controlled by parent and let's say you want to get rid of the relationship, what happens? Then you are free, correct? If you're out of a relationship, then you are free to go anywhere and do anything. That's why Salesforce says the OWD for the child object that has been removed from the relationship will be set to the highest level, which is public read write, and the grant access checkbox will automatically be set to true. You don't have to set it. Okay. Now, whenever a user's role is changed, the sharing rule is reapplied based on the new role. Meaning, if I take a look at my user, right, I was assigned the chairman role, correct? So if I look at the chairman role, Himanshu will be assigned that role. If all of a sudden my role changes in the company, right, then I should have access to the right kind of records. Correct. So if let's say from chairman I move to the channel sales team, I will not have access to all the records that the chairman has. I'll only have access to the records that the channel sales team role has. So the sharing settings that get reapplied or recalculated when we do an internal or external level access change applies here also. If a role is changed for a user, the sharing rule is reapplied based on the new role. All right. So that's two good to know things. Perfect. So that was all about role hierarchy. What we have discussed as of now is the OWD, which is the org-wide default, which is called the sharing settings, which has two different types, internal access and external access, alongside the grant access using hierarchies checkbox, which is only available for custom objects, and it helps share records based on the role hierarchy concept. All right. Great. The next thing we are looking at is very interesting in this entire game of sharing, and it is called sharing rules. What we have done as of now is we have looked at the OWD setting that is from the platform, right? We can just configure private, read only, or read write. Role hierarchy, we can say grant access, we can assign roles. But now we are looking at opening up access based on criteria, based on who owns the record. That's when writing custom rules come into the picture and you create sharing rules. Okay, so sharing rules, everything has the keyword sharing, right? So don't get confused. Sharing rules is part of sharing setting. Sharing settings are the OWD settings, the org wide default, right? And sharing rules come under the scenario wherein you don't have access and you want to open up access by writing some rule which will be based or governed by a criteria or by some kind of rule. Okay, so let's say if Himanshu is the owner of this particular region's data, these four people should also get access to that same data because they work with him. So this is a custom rule, correct? In such cases you have to create or configure a rule, and that's called a sharing rule. Okay, so records owned by user A should always be shared with user X, Y, and Z. That's a custom rule. Okay, records owned by any of the users from this particular portal should be shared with all of these roles, these 7 roles. So you need to write custom sharing rules, which is basically nothing but sharing rules, and that is what we'll be discussing in our next section.